Hello and welcome to Just Films and That. This is the podcast that celebrates films we reckon might be underrated or underseen. And sometimes we like to listen to what you guys think might be underrated or underseen and get you to drop us your suggestions. And that's exactly what happened this week. And we're going to be talking about Grosse, Pointe Blank from 1997. So let's see what we reckon. So then, Josh, like I said, this week it's another amazing listener suggestion. We've had some real corkers over the past few months, and this one is no exception. It's Grosse Pointe Blank from 1997. So tell us a bit about who picked this one, what it's about, and why they picked it.
Yes, so Grosse Pointe Blank then. This has been suggested by one of our Patreons, Jason. He is one of our wonderful Patreons. And he is part of a tier where if you pay £5 a month, you can suggest a film for us to do, which is exactly what he has done. So anyone who is interested in going over to Patreon, it's patreon.com/justfilms and that. If you go into the episode description for this, all the links will be there. Loads of tiers in there. Every tier comes with early access to episodes, ad-free episodes, extended episodes, and a few bonus things as well, like being able to suggest a film, which, as I've already said, is what the wonderful Jason did. So I got in touch with Jason and asked him why he suggested this. And he said, and I asked him to tell us a little bit about himself as well. And he said, I'm a gardener from West Norfolk. I live with my partner and 2 children. I enjoy films, TV shows, and football, and listen to podcasts about these subjects, which is obviously how he found us. A little bit of true crime as well. And I think Grosse Pointe Blank is underrated and underseen. Apart from my brother, I don't really know of anyone who's ever watched it in the context of discussions about John Cusack. This film seems to get missed all the time. So he's picked it because he thinks it's underrated. So let's get stuck into talking about it then. Had you seen this one before, Alice?
I hadn't seen it and I hadn't heard of it. And John Cusack is someone whose name I've seen and heard flying around there for ages, but I have no idea who he is, and I don't think I've ever seen
you don't
anything
know who John
that
Cusack
he's in.
is?
No idea, not a clue. I didn't recognise his face. I knew the name. I know Joan Cusack from various things, but not John. So I was interested to see what he was all about. What about you, Josh? Had you seen this one before?
I had seen this one before. I'd seen it before and enjoyed it before, and was quite glad when Jason picked it, to be honest, because it just gave me a chance to talk about a film I've enjoyed before and watch it again. So I'm interested to know. We're literally going in this with you having never ever seen a John Cusack film or even heard it, because there's 1 or 2 on my list.
Oh,
and I really wanted to pick, at one point, High Fidelity, which you should watch if you liked this. If you like John Cusack, you should watch High Fidelity. I would never pick it for the podcast because, to be honest, it's neither underseen nor underrated, I don't think. But if anyone wants to suggest it and make a case for it, they can do, but I'm not going to pick it. But there's a couple of other ones on my list as well. So yes, I'd seen it before. I'd enjoyed it before. So since you hadn't seen it before, I think we should come to you first.
Okay.
What were your general thoughts and what did you like about it?
What did you think I thought about it, Josh?
I can't. So it's quite interesting, isn't it? Because it's a sort of formulaic plot with unformulaic things in it. It's a sort of rom-com, anti-rom-com sort of thing. So that's what I quite like about it, is that it's a sort of dark comedy that errs on the side of light. Do you know what I mean? It's not dark in the way that some dark comedies are like. You know, the way that people say things like Bronson's a dark comedy, or some Coen Brothers films are like, I don't know, No Country for Old Men. Some people might see it as that, or something like that. Might see it as a darker comedy. Whereas it's dark in places. In the subject matter, it's dark, but it's quite upbeat and light in its execution. I think you liked it because I think I can imagine you really liking Martin Blanc as a character, as a leading man.
Interesting.
I think you could. I think you liked it, and also it's got a great soundtrack.
Ha ha ha! It
so
has
that
got
usually
a great soundtrack, hasn't it? But yes, I did like it, and I liked it a lot more than I thought I was going to. And to be honest, it just totally starts with a bang, doesn't it? So if we start with the opening scene, which I just think is so nicely constructed, it's such a strong start and invites so many questions and so much intrigue about this guy and the situation he's found himself in. And it just sets the tone for the film up really well as this hitman film that is going to be a bit daft. And, we're not talking kind of serious thriller type assassin stuff. It's how does this expert killer cope with its high school reunion.
Yeah, that's
like
it, isn't it?
I just love that as a concept. I think the opportunity for comedy in there is endless, and they do really utilize it, and I found it thoroughly entertaining.
It's a really good mix of a sort of high and low stakes. It's someone who's constantly involved in high stakes situations in a low stakes situation, and that being that, and that being the type of character he is as being quite neurotic and paranoid and highly intelligent and all that sort of thing. Just killing people for a living. He talks at one point about killing like dictators and politicians and stuff like that, but he's scared to go to his high school reunion. So that sort of idea is quite interesting, and that's what I mean. I suppose there's a strong concept there in and a strong formula, but it is done a little bit differently, which is what I think brings people to it.
Yeah, for sure. I totally get that. I think the script is excellent as well. The whole thing is just really nicely written. It's a very wordy film, and a lot of the conversations are really intriguing or entertaining and witty. And it is just pretty funny. Like a lot of the comedy for me comes from Martin's relationship with Marcella, who's like his secretary. And the film does a great job at establishing their relationship very quickly. And they're both instantly quite likable because of it. Like there's no need for just like pages and pages of script and dialogue to kind of suss out who these people are. They're having a conversation over the phone while he's trying to do a hit. And I feel like you just learn everything you need to know about these characters in that moment.
Do you think that's because they're brother and sister, so they sort of bounce off each other well?
I mean, it could be, couldn't it? But they spend so much of the film on the phone to each other, so they're not really.
And are they ever actually in person together?
They are at one point, because he comes over and he calls her Sergeant Pepper because of the jacket that she's wearing, which I also found very funny. But I think that's the only time where he sort of comes back to the office, and then other than that, they've got almost like a strictly telephone relationship. But I think there's like an element of creativity, a creativity opportunity in there as well. And because the way you talk to someone over the phone is different to how you talk to them in person. So I think it means the kind of conversations they can have are a bit more like tongue in cheek and stuff, and talking about really serious things like killing people as if it's nothing, but then talking about the high school reunion like it's the end of the world. And I just love how obsessed she is with him going to the reunion as well. He's like, she keeps saying, it's like, I think you should go. And then it's like, oh, you can do a hit while you're there. So, not a total waste of time.
You can mix it with work.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, there's a lot of comedy in the nonchalance of the way they approach what they're doing. So there's a whole subplot in it of the sort of antagonist, if you like, is played by Dan Aykroyd, and he's another hitman. And the whole thing is he's trying to basically unionize all hitmen.
Which is funny, isn't it?
Yeah, because they keep turning up at the same job. Because two people have hired him to kill the same person or whatever. So then it's like, it's almost like they are talking about their career of being professional killers in the same way like traveling salesmen would talk about, like, oh, don't go and try and sell them, I don't know, fabric softener, or I don't know, the traveling salesman even a thing anymore, but don't go and try and sell them the product because I've already tried to sell them the product, that sort of thing. And it is a very funny, it does that great thing that a lot of dark comedies do, which is like by addressing really dark stuff in a really normal way. Every now and then you just get sucked into the world. Every now and then you go, oh yeah, they'll kill people.
Yeah, and it means when the sort of the violence and the aggression does happen, so like when we have maybe the shootout at the end, or you've got when Martin's trying to poison someone in his hotel room and stuff, it's like a bit of a jolt, isn't it? It's like, oh yeah, shit, that's his job, and that's what the film's all about. And it's just a really interesting blend, and I think the film pulls it off so well. What were some of your favourite things about this? Obviously, you said you'd already seen it and you'd already enjoyed it.
Yeah, so I'd already seen it, already enjoyed it. Yeah, so we've talked a little bit there about the comedy and the script and stuff like that. I want to talk a little bit around the performances and the cast and stuff like that. So let's talk about John Cusack, who you'd never heard of. So John Cusack's
I'd heard of him.
Oh, you'd heard of him? Sorry, never seen anything with him.
Never seen him in anything.
So John Cusack, and I want to talk a little bit about John Cusack and the character of Martin Blanc himself, because he's a bit of a different leading man, Martin Blanc, and I think John Cusack's particularly good at this. A little bit like the way someone like Nicolas Cage can be really good at it, or in that they're a leading man, but there's a little bit of edge to them, there's a little bit of quirk to them. Because Martin Blanc as a character, he's really interesting because he's neurotic, he's highly intelligent, but at the same time he's really, really likable. And despite the fact that he kills people for a living, you still root for him, you still want him to succeed. They even managed to build a little bit of empathy for him by things like the fact that he goes back to his hometown and his mum's in a care home and his childhood home has been replaced by a shop and stuff like that. So, and I love that idea of an, he brings, I think John Cusack, what he does is he brings a really great sort of quirky energy to the character. I think he's an interesting screen presence, because what he is he's a sort of, the way I've written it here is he's a intense, sexy everyman with a bit of a dark side. He's as good as the sort of guy who is unhinged and is trying to keep a bit of a lid on it, but at the same time he's also got a bit of normality to him. He's not full Nicolas Cage, but he's also not full Tom Cruise. He's slap bang in the middle of those two, if anyone ever has been. So I love the idea of him as this sort of neurotic guy trying to, he requires anonymity for his job, and he's then thrust into a world where he's constantly recognised and constantly asked questions about what he does for a living. I think he does a perfect job of sort of likability, broodingness, intensity, and that sort of thing. And then I want to talk a little bit as well about Minnie Driver. So Minnie Driver is the female lead in this. I mean, I think she's great. So I don't know if we've done many other films with her in, but she's in I Give It a Year. And I remember when we did I Give It a Year, talking about how we thought she was really funny, because obviously she's British, but she's American in this. She's the emotional heart of the film, really, because she's the girlfriend that he stood up at prom because he freaked out, joined the army, went into business for myself, killed people, whatever it is, the line that he keeps saying. And I think Minnie Driver's quite underrated. She's always really charming and watchable. Again, if you think about I Give It a Year, where she's got a small but memorable part, or if you think about something like Good Will Hunting, where she's got a bigger part and again is a big emotional part of that film. I think there's a really, really great chemistry between those two as well. They do actually sparkle a little bit when they're together. When they first get together, there's this bit where obviously she's not seen him for 10 years because he stood her up at prom, and there's a little moment where they have a little standoff, and then she just kisses him, and it's really sort of quite, I think it's quite funny. Great supporting cast in this as well. So you've got the late great Alan Arkin, who obviously we did earlier this year in Freebie and the Bean, has sadly since passed away, but he's the therapist that doesn't want to be his therapist. Really, really love that. You got Jeremy Piven in there as his sort of childhood friend who I liked. Hank Azaria in there as an FBI agent, and then for me, Joan Cusack is the highlight of as Marcella, his PA. I mean, there's a lot of great manic energy in this. I read somewhere that the director had everyone do multiple takes in different ways. So apparently there's like a cut of the film where it's quite underplayed, and there's a cut of the film where it's quite overplayed. And I think the third version is what you see, which is sort of those two mixed together, because there are bits where Dan Aykroyd's doing his shtick, as is it Grosse, the villain, and it's very much like normally you're used to seeing Dan Aykroyd, quick fire lines, da 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 da, and there's other bits where he's got like absolute chaos in his eyes, and you're like, it's not a side of him you've seen before. So yeah, really great performances from all around, but obviously particularly carried by I think John Cusack. But yeah, what did you think of the performances?
Well, I had a whole paragraph here written about Debbie and about her character, because it's exactly like you said. I believe their relationship. Like, they have got good on-screen chemistry. And because we're sort of not too far from doing Fantastic Four and then Fantastic Four Rise of the Silver Surfer, and because in that Reed Richards and Susan Storm don't have any chemistry whatsoever, and it's kind of quite irritating and it makes you get bored of the film, I think I'd sort of forgotten how important it is to have that spark and to actually believe that the people you're watching would have a relationship, or that they would be connected in some way. Yeah. And with these two, I just totally bought it. I completely kind of believed their history and believed their relationship.
I think, isn't it? It's like
magnetism. For sure.
Yeah, I mean, if leading characters don't have chemistry when they need to, I don't even mean romantic, even if they just have to have chemistry, even if it's two leads in an action film or whatever.
Yeah, for sure.
Then if they don't have that chemistry, it is deafening when you watch it.
Yeah,
it's almost distracting. It's like a crap special effect.
And even if they're faking it, like even if you have to fake it, like I get it, some actors don't get on. You hear, stories about us like, oh yeah, these two hated each other on set, but on screen they just brought it, and it, the magic comes to life, sort of thing. But now, because I've had a couple of instances where I've seen it lacking, so then to see it again in this, I was just like, oh yeah, that's what it is. That's what the magic is, where you just believe that these people existed and knew each other before, and then will go on to keep knowing each other after. It's that sort of thing, isn't it? But Debbie as a character, I did think was really great. I love the way that she's sort of spoken about before we see her, as if she's like going to be this incredible like supermodel type angel from above sort of thing, because Martin seems to be sort of semi obsessed with her. Like there's a bit of heartbreak that's gone on there that we hear about
Dreams
with his
about her
therapist.
every night.
Exactly. So you're expecting just like this wow factor of a woman, and the first scene or the first shot that we see of her is her mouth and her lips when she's talking into the microphone doing her radio show, and then you sort of pull out to get like this medium wide, and she's just like this normal kind of looking woman. Like she just looks normal, and she's wearing a jumper and she's not wearing much makeup, and it just kind of makes her that bit more endearing, and it makes Martin more endearing as well, because it's just like that sort of girl next door thing. It's like, oh, this was just your childhood sweetheart, but because of the way it ended, he never got the closure, she never got the closure, and that's why she's just sort of stuck in his head.
Yeah, he's
and
almost deified her in his head of like, this girl, she was everything, and sort of thing. Yeah, that's a really good point actually. It never even occurred to me.
And you're definitely rooting for them as well. And like, obviously as it goes on and he keeps saying, oh yeah, kill people for a living. And she's like, haha, yeah. Because he says it to everyone and obviously no one believes him. And then obviously towards the end, and there's a hit that's out on her dad, and they have the shootout in her house and stuff. And he asks her to marry him when, they're getting shot at and stuff. And he's covered in blood and all that. It was just really nice sort of building of their relationship and watching sort of how they develop. And you are happy when they sort of drive off together at the end. You've already touched on there, but yes, some of the side characters are just so funny, like his estate agent buddy, and like the guy who's kind of a police officer but not a police officer in the neighborhood and sort of thing. Like they've just got
who's
really
like
good...
stop showing up to house viewings.
Yeah, like they've just got really good one-liners. They're sort of quite well developed in a very short space of time, and I like the way that they all interact with Martin.
Do a lot of good world building, don't they? It's as if you get the impression from the world they built that he's the only one that left.
Yeah.
And then it goes back and it's like, oh, everyone's still the same.
Yeah.
They just have jobs now and kids and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. But they're really clever the way they do that. And just finally, I love the shootout at the end. I think it's a brilliant scene, a brilliant sequence. You get it sort of flip-flops between being incredibly violent and incredibly aggressive to then being amusing and fun with lots of quippy one-liners. And I just thought it was designed really well. What about you? Was there anything else for you there that you liked on this?
Just to touch on that, I think there is some good action in it. I like the end shootout. I also like the fight in the school with the hitman. So that other hitman is actually...
Isn't it? Yeah.
He's not... Well, I suppose he's an actor by definition in that he's in this, but he is actually John Cusack's kickboxing teacher.
Well,
so John Cusack's really into kickboxing. I know this. John Cusack's really into kickboxing, and that guy is I can't remember his surname. His first name's Benny, and he developed his own. The way Bruce Lee developed his own martial art. He developed his own sort of style or spin on kickboxing. And he trained John Cusack, and then he's in this. So, and I think once you know that and you watch it, you can tell that obviously they've. I don't think you could tell they've sparred before because it's a choreographed fight, but it's a well choreographed fight by two people who definitely know what they're doing. I think that really shows.
So we'll move on now then to talking about anything that we didn't like about the film, or perhaps anything that we would change. So Josh, what does this list look like for you?
It was a tough one, this, because there's not loads. I was trying to find, because it's not like it wouldn't be a film that like it didn't blow me away. It's not like in my top 10 or anything like that. It's just a decent, well-made comedy that I think probably, like Jason, deserves to be seen by more people or be better rated or whatever. In terms of what I've put in here, I think you could probably see that some people might see the comedy as a bit niche or a bit subtle in places. Okay. I think more people might be expecting, comedic set pieces or more comedic set pieces, and that sort of thing. I don't particularly feel like that, but I can see how you would. The only other thing I've put is the twist at the end with Minnie Driver's dad seems a bit random.
Okay.
It's just sort of, so he's in the middle of, he's been to the high school reunion, he's having the battle with Dan Aykroyd's character, and then at one point, he is just suddenly they're trying to kill Minnie Driver's dad. And he never really found out why, and I wonder if perhaps there's something there that was lost at the editing process or something like that, as to maybe there's a little subplot of actually he's a bit shady or whatever. And obviously he is a bit shady. That's why they're trying to kill him, because there's a whole message throughout the film of the way he rationalizes killing people is, well, if you've done something to bring me to your door, you've probably done something wrong. Which, to be fair, the logic of that does sort of work out to a degree, but not necessarily, because people, you might just hire someone to kill your partner. Do you know what I mean?
Well, exactly, because you're just
it.
fuming. They
Yeah,
didn't
or
load the
for
dishwasher again. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, he should though, shouldn't he? He should load the dishwasher, to be fair. No, yeah. So that twist at the end with Minnie Driver's dad seemed a little bit like they needed to get the characters into a place for a set piece, and they chose his house, and that seemed a bit random. So I don't know. What do you think of that?
So I hadn't considered that at all, but now that you've said it, it does sort of feel a bit rushed. Like it feels like, oh, we need to end the film.
Yeah.
Because you have the great moment where he kills the guy in the school with the pen. Brilliant. Nice and visceral, that. I love it. And you kind of feel like, oh, that is the climax of the film, right? This was the thing that we've been talking about for ages. This is what the characters have been focused on for a while. And then it just sort of kind of goes, oh, no, we need another thing. What can the next thing be? So it does feel a bit like, oh yeah, we needed a way to finish the film, and that does feel a little bit shoehorned in there, actually.
Yeah.
Now that you mention it, I really
They
see
needed
that.
John Cusack. They needed Martin to kill Dan Aykroyd.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought that was a little bit. I'd never noticed that before. In my head, I remembered it that they ended up at Minnie Driver's house because he was just followed there. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, they're just trying to kill him.
They're just trying to kill him. But it's not that. There's just a random twist, and it's not needed. So that's the only thing for me. What about you then? Is there much for you?
So there are just two things for me. One of them I do think is a genuine point, but the other one I feel like is just my personal taste. First one is that there is the odd bit of lazy storytelling where a character just needs to say a thing to let the audience know without showing us or without using perhaps more sophisticated methods to get the information across. So the main instance of this that I noticed is when Dan Aykroyd's character Grosse, he realizes that Martin is going to go to Detroit and that he's taken a job off them. And he literally says to himself, fucking Martin Blank snaked the Detroit job from me. And I was like, I didn't really feel like he needed to say it, because I feel like enough had gone on for us to realize and for him to be able to figure out without him having to tell us explicitly.
Yeah, it's telling, not showing a little bit, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly, because he's having that conversation online with someone who says, oh, I found someone else to do it or something. And then obviously he clicks like, oh yeah, Martin's going to Detroit, it must be him. But because we've already established that he knows that Martin's going to Detroit anyway, I feel like he could have just been like, oh, son of a bitch. Like we could have just had like a light bulb moment. I don't think he needed to say it. So that was just one that I really noticed in particular. The other thing,
this is personal preference, this one.
This is personal preference, and this is me maybe just missing the point a little bit here, but I would have loved to have seen more assassinations or more attempted assassinations. So that opening scene is great with all the shooting, and then you've got another one later on where Martin's trying to poison someone by dropping poison in their mouth while he's like up in the ceiling and then the person's sleeping down below. And because these scenes were so well done, I would have liked to have seen more. I wanted a bit more violence, a bit more of these like creative techniques. So like, well, how do you succeed as an assassin, as a hitman? What are the different things that you need to think of and do and that sort of thing? So I wanted a little bit more of that. But the film is obviously meant to be more about this hitman, this like cold-blooded killer being out of his comfort zone at his high school reunion and how kind of silly that sounds that he can't cope with this situation, even though he's in high pressure situations all the time. So I do get that. I just kind of thought, oh, I would have liked to see just, how I like my violence, Josh. I would have liked a little bit more.
You do love violence. So that'd be something you'd change then, perhaps more different. So maybe at the beginning, rather than it being one thing, it's multiple intercuts of him killing 3 or 4 different people in different ways as he argues with Marcella on the phone, something like that.
Yeah, exactly. A few more, or just like a few more dotted out throughout the film. Yeah,
I think it definitely. It does. It's not. I don't think it loses anything in the way that it's made, but I think that it would definitely gain something from the way you've said it there. Yeah. So yeah.
We'll move on now then to talking about the critical reception and assessing whether we agree that this film is perhaps underrated or underseen. So I've not seen the critical reception.
No.
I tell you, have you got that ready?
I've got
for
it
us,
here.
Josh?
I've got it here. How do you think it did? How do I think
it did?
And what would you give it?
I think I think we can comfortably call this a low 7. I think we're probably looking at like a 7 point. I'll say a 7.3.
Okay.
What do I think it got? I think it probably got about that, to be honest. I think it's a well-made film. I think it's funnier than you sort of expect it to be, and funnier in quite subtle ways as well, which I do quite enjoy. So I reckon, 7.3, and that's what I think it got, and that is what I would give it.
Interesting. Okay, let's have a look. And so at the time of recording, on IMDb, it gets 7.3.
No, it does.
It does.
The problem is when I'm too accurate, it seems like I'm lying, and it seems like I've looked that up just so I can look amazing and like I'm just great at reading films.
Yes, but then on the other hand, over on Rotten Tomatoes, you're a bit out here because the critics give it 82%.
Oh wow, that's high.
And the audience give it 87%, which averages out about 8 out of 10.
Oh wow.
So I mean, for me, I'd say I'm happy to call that appropriately rated, but I don't know, would you say that's overrated?
Well, I think I would say for me that is a little bit overrated, but because obviously I'm quite harsh, 8 is like that's like a knockout for me. Like we're talking, some of the best cinema I've ever seen sort of thing.
One of your 8s is like an 8.5 for me.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, I do think that's a little bit overrated, but I am more than happy to concede on this for sure, and for this to go in the appropriately rated vault, but I don't think it's underrated.
If Jason reckons it's underrated, I reckon it's appropriately rated, and you think it's overrated. Let's put it to the listeners and see what they think, because that's 3 different options. Okay, there we go. Another listener suggestion in the bag. We'll put it out to you guys as to what you think it is. But thank you very much for Jason for getting in touch and suggesting a film, for supporting us on Patreon. We massively appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jason. That was a good one.
It was a good one. Yes. Anyway, it's your turn to pick next week, Alice. So, what are we watching, digesting, and talking about next week?
Okay, so sort of sticking, with the violent theme, which
good.
We know that I'm quite into, but a different sort of thing going on. So we're gonna be watching, and this is we'll see how we go with this. We'll see what you think, but we've got to be watching Action Force, otherwise also known as the G.I. Joe movie.
The G.I. Joe movie.
So
not the one with Channing Tatum.
No, it's animated.
Right. Okay. Oh, interesting. Another animated one. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So it's called Action Force.
So I'll tell you all about it next week, but I know it as Action Force. I believed it was released in the UK as Action Force, but in America it's G.I. Joe the movie.
Right. Okay. Well, next week we'll call it Action Force. So next week we're going to be talking about Action Force. In the meantime, if you'd like to get in touch with us, it's filmsandthatpod@gmail.com. We're on all the social medias. If you just search for Just Films and That on wherever you get your social media, Facebook, Twitter, X, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, you'll find us all. Check us out. Give us a follow. Get in touch if you've got a film, and we very much like to hear from you. We're on the television as well, aren't we, Alice?
We are indeed. Every Friday evening from 6 p.m, you can find us on the local TV network. So if you live in Birmingham, Bristol, Leeds, Liverpool, or the northeast of England, you can find us on Channel 7 on Freeview. Or if you live in North Wales or South Wales, you can find us on Channel 8 on Freeview. I'm also uploading all the videos to Dailymotion, so if you slide on over there and type in Just Films and That, you'll be able to see exactly what it is we're up to. And it's, as always, talking about all our favourite underrated and underseen films.
Yes, indeed. Well, thank you very much for listening this week, and we'll see you next week. It's goodbye from me. Cheerio.
Bye.